Hari Om. Thanks to Swami Chidananda ji for this opportunity to speak on the webinar. The topic I have chosen to speak on is Vedanta, the ultimate answer to the problem of suffering. I work as a neurosurgeon in a large hospital in Bangalore. And as a neurosurgeon, we see a whole spectrum of human suffering as disease, disability, and death. A good part of our practice is emergencies. It could be a serious road traffic accident or sometimes a major brain hemorrhage. And often the families wheel in their relatives in a very acute condition. And once a person is shifted into the intensive care or into the operating room, they have serious questions of what is going to happen to my family member. Is he going to survive? If he's going to survive, is he going to have any disability? Will he be able to work? Will he come back to normal condition? Now, these are situations that we see day in and day out. And this is one aspect of very serious physical suffering. In our outpatient practice, we see another spectrum of patients. Almost 60% of the patients we see are what I could call as psychosomatic diseases. Now, because of various psychological situations, because of various stresses, they have a lot of physical problems. Now, it may look physical, but the real basis is actually psychological. It was only very recently, maybe just yesterday, I got to see a young lady who had come in with a husband and a sweet 2-year-old daughter. And she was telling me about a host of physical problems. And one thing occurred to me, that there must be something other than just a physical problem. And when I asked her, is there something bothering you? Why is that you have come now to address this problem? She requested her husband and daughter to leave. And I was shocked when she rolled the sleeve up to show the amount of injuries she had sustained on her body. And she confessed that her husband physically abuses her. Now, there are two elements to the problem. One is the physical pain, but far deeper than the physical pain is the psychological pain. And it is a psychological situation that can secondly result in a sort of a physical disease. The third category of patients that we see are people whose bodies are all right, but who have serious psychological problems like depression, anxiety. One has, if somebody has a family member with one such problem, you see the extent of suffering that they can go through. And these sort of illnesses, all these affect not only a person's as a disease, it has its impact socially also. The big concern is what will happen to his job. Will he be able to come back and take his job? In certain professions, like in the armed forces, or if a person is a pilot, and if a person has a certain physical disease, they may not go to a regular hospital. They may come to certain private clinics, because any such disease, if it is on their record, it may affect their ability to go back to work. Now, as doctors, we see such patients every day. Now, when you are very sensitive, when you empathize with the sufferings of the people, you do get affected. Now, the alternative is when you become relatively resistant or thick-skinned, and family members can easily make out that you are not sensitive. So the key is how you can be extremely sensitive at the same time not affected. And as we see this day in and day out, it has been, I have been looking for various answers to see how we can find a meaning to the problem of human suffering. I drew a lot of inspiration from the work of Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was a psychiatrist who was incarcerated in the Nazi concentration camps. He went through a lot of physical suffering. Even though he was a very successful doctor, he went through all the physical pain in the concentration camps, just like any other prisoner along with him. But being a doctor, being a psychiatrist, he made certain very pertinent observations. While the situation was the same, there were some people who were able to handle the situation very cheerfully and not allow themselves to be affected, and even had a certain sense of humor about it, whereas other people just broke down and were not able to survive. Now, he put his thoughts into a form of therapy called logotherapy. Logotherapy means how I can derive meaning from my own suffering. Viktor Frankl describes his own experiences when he went through a stage when he was subject to forced surgical operations. And when he was on the operating table, he went through a phase when he said, these people can do anything to my body, they cannot do anything to me. Now, this was a breakthrough in an understanding that I am someone other than the body. Now, our job is to see what is the normal attitudes that we have whenever we go through difficulty. Because what Viktor Frankl had to say is that the attitude creates the altitude. Ordinarily, we will say that, you know, whenever we go through difficulty, we feel life is not fair. Life is not fair. I am always unlucky. I must have done something wrong. Now, whenever you have negative thoughts, and it is these negative thoughts which will not help you to be able to learn from the whole suffering. Now, I will take an example of how people live in very cold countries. And people, for example, Chicago, for instance, which is on Lake Michigan. And during winters, and when the winter is very bad, even if the weather is sub-freezing temperature, life will go on as normal. Things may slow down, but life will go on as normal because they anticipate winter and they are prepared for winter. Now, as a doctor, what we see is whatever happens to our patients can happen to us at some stage. And therefore, one of the learnings is that can we use each of these examples to see when such things happen to us, you know, how are we mentally prepared? Part of it is our whole psychological attitude to it. There is a book written by a Jewish rabbi which says when bad things happen to good people, they do not become bitter, but they become better. And it is our job to see how I can learn from each of these experiences. There is a beautiful quotation which says, when you win, you win. When you lose, you learn, and therefore you win. How you can be a winner always. Now, sometimes we learn more from the difficult experiences of our life than from the pleasant experiences in life. In music, you have certain octaves. Sariga is one octave, Mapada is a higher octave, and Nisa is a higher octave still. We are here to be able to grow spiritually. When the Mughal Emperor Akbar built his new capital, Fatehpur Sikri, he built a huge monument, and which was the gateway to the Jama Masjid. And on this huge wall, there is an inscription which is put up even there. He asked some of the Sufi saints who were there to put up a beautiful quotation, and they gave him few lines of Jesus, which is put up there. And the words go that Isa, son of Maria, had this to say. And the inscription put up on that wall on Fatehpur Sikri goes like this: human life is like a bridge, don't make your house on it. This is a temporary abode. You're here to grow, you're here to evolve. And this can happen only if you're able to learn from each of our experiences. Every religion has its own way to be able to handle difficulty and sufferings. In the Islamic prayer, Inshallah. Inshallah is a beautiful prayer which says, you know, that I'm able to accept the will of Lord, whatever it is. And Jesus has given a very beautiful prayer where he says, thy will be done. It is not my will. Now, each of these things have to be taken in the context of the prayer of the Alcoholic Anonymous. Whenever we are in a difficult situation, we need to be able to see whatever is there in my resources to make it possible. And the actual quotation is, give me the courage to change the things I can, accept that which I cannot, and the wisdom to know the difference. Now, when you see and look for various solutions or various approaches to the problem of suffering, there is no real complete answer to the problem of suffering. And if there is one which is perhaps better than most, is the law of karma. Now, what does the law of karma says? The law of karma says every action that you do has a consequence. And if you do a good action, it produces happiness. If you do a bad action, it produces sorrow, it brings about. And therefore, what is the healthy attitude that you could have for the law of karma? And the most healthy attitude is, whatever situation I'm going through now, I am totally responsible. I take responsibility for every situation in my life. And when I take responsibility for all situations in my life, I stop blaming anybody for the problems that I am in. Now, this is one of the first steps in a spiritual life, that you stop blaming anybody for whatever you go through. And the next important thing is, the future is dependent upon the actions that I take in the present. And if I want a good future, I need to sow the seeds of happiness in my life today. I stop blaming anybody. My faith in God is not shaken up, because I know that I am responsible for everything that I'm going through. Another thing that we often encounter, and a lot of people are shaken by the fact that a lot of mean and corrupt people have seemingly good life. On the other hand, you will see people who lead excellent lives, who are wonderful people, but who go through major physical and emotional and other forms of sufferings. Now, how do we answer that? Now, again, the law of karma says that the present ethical person is going through whatever suffering because of past and unethical action. And the present corrupt or bad person is enjoying because of past ethical action. And therefore, whenever you do ethical actions, you are blessed by it, and any unethical action has a consequence either now or subsequently. Now, coming to the problem of how does Vedanta approach the problem of suffering. Now, if you go to a teacher of Vedanta, how does a Vedantic teacher address the problem of suffering? Now, I gave you a whole spectrum of human suffering, which I said, whether it is physical, whether it is psychosomatic, whether it is psychological, and the person is going through a suffering, that suffering is real. A Vedantic teacher never gives the answer very directly. And it is possible that all the people who are listening to this are students of Vedanta. So I have taken the courage to be able to address how a Vedantic teacher would approach the problem if you would go. Every Vedantic teacher is able to empathize with you when you go through a certain amount of suffering. And when you go through a suffering, now, although they know the suffering is not so real, they are able to empathize with you, just like, for instance, a little child playing with a balloon. And as she was playing with the balloon explodes, and the child is devastated and upset and comes to you. Now, you can feel the sorrow of the child. It may be a burst balloon. It may not be a big thing for you. But now you can empathize with the child, and you play games with the child, and you really feel the problem through which this child is going through. Now, what does a Vedantic teacher have to say? Now, the whole approach to Vedanta is, if I could say, is from MBBS to MJBS. What is MBBS? Now, if you look at life and what Vedanta calls life as samsara, our lives are repetitive, it is boring. And a teacher has nicely elaborated as our life is MBBS, as meaningless, boring, burdensome struggle. And is there a way out? Vedanta says there is a way out. And from MBBS to MJBS. What is MJBS? I will come to MJ a little later, because this is the most difficult part of Vedantic teaching. I will address BS first. What is BS? BS means Brahma Satyam. Brahma Satyam means God is the only reality, God or Brahman. Now, to an extent, we all understand God as the reality. But if you're able to take God as the infinite, all-pervading principle, as the reality, now to an extent, every religion accepts this, that God is real. The very common Islamic prayer also says the same thing. La ilaha illallah means the same thing. There is La ilaha, other than Allah, there is no other God. There is no God but God. And that is the literal translation of La ilaha illallah. Now, the second part of the Vedantic teaching, MJBS, means Mithya Jagat. Now, how do we translate the word Mithya? The word Mithya has no English translation. It is better understood as Mithya itself. And what does Mithya mean? Mithya means experientially real, even though it may not be factually real. I will give you some examples. Now, you may just go out of your room and you look up at the sky, you see a canopy-like blue dome. The blue sky appears very real, but we know that you can travel out into space. There is nothing like a blue sky. If you see a water body from a distance, you will see the water looking blue, and as you go closer, the water is colorless. There is nothing blue in it. Another very common experience which comes under the term Mithya is about sunset and sunrise. Every day we see the sun rising or the sun setting. My eyes can clearly see the setting sun or the rising sun. Although it is my experience, and not only my experience, it is the experience of everybody, the fact is the reality is something other than my experience. Now, what is factually not true but experientially true is the meaning of the word Mithya. Now, another very powerful method in which the Vedantic teachers try to explain Mithya is the experience of dream. Now, while you are in a dream, the dream experience is absolutely real. The dream experience, you realize it is a dream only when you wake up. And while you are going through the dream, even if it was a nightmarish experience, that experience at that time for you is absolutely real. Let me give you two examples. A lady comes to me for a thorough evaluation, and she says, "Doctor, I've had cancer of the breast which is spread to all parts of my body. Can you do a thorough examination to verify?" But she apparently looked very well, and she said, "You know, this happened to me in my dream, and I really want to confirm." You know, the moment you hear that this happened in your dream, immediately you take it as a lower level of reality, because whatever happened in your dream, because the dream body does not have a real existence, and your body has nothing to do with the dream body. I'll give you another example. It may be a sort of a joke. A man comes to a police station and reports to the officer. He says, "I have to confess, I've committed a murder." The man looks up and says, "So what happened?" He says, "I killed my wife." The next question he asks is, "Where?" And for a police officer in a police station, very important it is to know the jurisdiction, because if it is beyond his jurisdiction, he will direct him to another police station, because it is a real pain to start the investigation. So he asked him, "Where did it happen?" So the man confessed, "This happened to me in my dream." Very relieved, the police officer looks to him and says, "Sir, you have come to the wrong place. You have to go to a mental hospital." Now, however real the experience in a dream, when you wake up, that experience is not so real. Now, according to a Vedantic master, so whenever we go with whatever suffering that we are, a Vedantic teacher clearly understands, although he may empathize with you, that this experience that you're going through is affecting a lower level of a reality. And once, you know, these are people, these Vedantic teachers speak from conviction. And what is the conviction? It is the conviction of a person who's awakened. And once a person has awakened, and a person has awakened to a higher level of consciousness, it is like the sun of consciousness has risen. And when the sun of consciousness has risen, the stars do not disappear, but they fade into insignificance. And this is the message of Vedanta. The message of Vedanta is, that is why all the Upanishads, Vedanta means the Upanishads. The Vedanta has got a very strong message. He says, Uttishtata, Jagrata. Jagrata means wake up. Uttishtata means get up, which means the Vedantic teachers can clearly see, compared to the state they are in, we are going through a certain nightmare. And when you are going through a nightmare, however intense the nightmare is, we don't have to look for a solution for a cancer in the dream. We just have to allow the person to wake up. Many years ago, when Ramana Maharshi was in Tiruvannamalai, and this was the time when the independence struggle was at its peak. Tiruvannamalai was one of the most frequented places for pilgrims from all over the world and from all over the country. And all great political masters like the first president, Sri Rajendra Prasad, and many of them, Mahatma Gandhi himself, wanted to come and meet Bhagwan Ramana Maharshi at Tiruvannamalai, but he could never do so. Each of these great masters would come and meet him, and they always hoped, at that time when the freedom struggle was at its height, and Ramana Maharshi had such a command and a huge following, they all had this request to him, Bhagwan, why don't you tell your people something about the freedom struggle? Why don't you empower people to get or galvanize them to work for the freedom of the country? And this is exactly what Bhagwan said. You know, Bhagwan had woken up into the higher level of reality, and to him, Jagan was Mithya. When I first heard the answer, I said, you know, why did such a great person give such an answer? I could not understand what he said. And the answer he gave was, you are in a movie theater. And in those early days in the movie theater, you see a lot of buckets kept in front. Now, suddenly when you see a lot of fire on the screen, do you take those buckets and throw it on the screen? For Bhagwan, this world was of a lower level of reality. Even though the country was burning with the fight for freedom, for him it was very clear from that spectrum, it was Jagan Mithya. Not that he was insensitive at all. You know, I remember there was an experience when a small child was brought to him with a certain cancer. And at those days, more than 50 years ago, there was no treatment available. And with all sympathy and all empathy that Bhagwan had, he gave this child a little mantra and asked the child to chant the mantra. And that mantra Bhagwan gave was, Naham Deham Koham Soham. And it summarizes the essential message of Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharshi. Naham Deham means I am not my body. Now, the moment a person like Bhagwan gives you this injunction that you are not the body, then suddenly a doubt will come into your mind. If I am not my body, because all my identity comes with the identification with this physical body. If I am not my body, the next step Bhagwan gives is Koham. And the central message for everybody who was suffering was, who am I? Nani yaar, Koham. Inquire into who your real presence. And when anybody would go with the suffering, he will say, who is suffering? Inquire who in you are suffering. And through the guidance of Vedantic teachers, through the very scriptural guidance, you discover Soham. Soham means Saha Aham Asmi. That Atma, that Brahman I am. And this is the grace. And being a human being, now this is the birthright and this is the glory of a human being, that we are born to be able to discover our fullest potential. We are born in a world where there are so many great masters, so many realized masters. Now, if you are prepared and if you go with the right questions, there are teachers who will be able to help you to discover your true self. And when you discover your true self, the Vedantic approach now helps you, just like when Hanuman was sent to bring Sanjeevani. Now, he was not able to identify exactly which among the various trees in that forest was Sanjeevani. And because the brief was so important, and when you're dealing with a problem which is really important, Hanuman had to make a quick decision. He did not want to take the wrong tree. He decided to take the entire mountain on a hill. Now, clearly, the mountain was far bigger than Hanuman. So Hanuman does a process when he becomes so big. When he becomes so big, the mountain becomes relatively small. And how do you become so big? Through identification of your true reality. When you realize, I am that. Brahma Satyam, Jagan Mithya, Jivo Brahmaiva Na Paraha. I would like to conclude with a tribute to all my great teachers who have put me onto the path of Vedanta by chanting this beautiful mantra, Sadashiva Samaramba Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Parampara. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Yes, I think Mr. Raghu Kumar is raising his hand. Oh, he is taken back.
Yeah, you're unmuted.
So that yes. MBBS and MJBS acronym was interesting. Could you please repeat it?
MBBS stands for, this is what one of my great acharyas said, MBBS stands for meaningless, boring, burdensome struggle. Now, whatever walks of life, you know, our lives are so repetitious. So MBBS stands for meaningless, burdensome, boring struggle. MJBS means Mithya Jagat Brahma Satya.
So it is the other way of Brahma Satya Jagan Mithya.
Absolutely right.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, here is Prasad. Yes, Prasad ji.
Thank you for a very wonderful, illuminating and inspiring talk. Can you give us some pointers on how we can stay awake and not lapse back into the dream?
See, once you're awake, you're not going to lapse back. Now, the whole job is to become awakened. This is a one-way process, and the process is through Jnana Yoga. Jnana Yoga is 3 steps. First is through a certain basic preparation, and once a person is prepared, fortunately around the world we are blessed with so many Vedantic acharyas who have the ability to communicate that wonderful Vedantic truths. Such people are called Shrotriya Brahmanishtas. And a Shrotriya Brahmanishta, and if grace brings you to one such acharya, and of course, in my own experience, this world is, we have so many of these teachers waiting for the right student. And you know, whenever you are in company with such teachers, they are able to slowly and slowly bring in this teaching of Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir, can you just click on that question tag? There are 2 or 3 questions. Type
right.
question.
I'll just click. Is it possible for, can you read it for me if you want? Somebody has put a dilemma because I can just see one word. You know, it comes in line. Is it possible for that?
Okay.
You can extend that window, and then maybe.
Okay, I'll try to extend that window. At times, I feel that. Can I read it?
Yes.
At
Yes.
times, one moment, I'll try. At times, I feel that karma theory combined with the theory of rebirth is only an explanation just to convince us of the relationship between action and its consequence, though I too believe in karma. All right. What can I say? You know, the more you are into this whole school of Vedanta, you see that there is a certain, I mean, there cannot be a greater explanation for everything than the school of this, I won't say theory as much as the law of karma. The law of karma essentially says every action that we do has a certain consequence. And it has been classified into 3 categories. The first category is called sanchita. Now, we have lived many lives, and in many lives we have committed a lot of punya and papa, and this combined bag is what we call the cloud data or the sanchita karma. When a person is born, now whoever the karma pala data who decides selects a certain amount of punya, selects a certain amount of papam, you know, that is our capital that with which we come into this world. And each jiva, when you're born with, is born with a certain amount of punya papa to a bank account, and that determines your lifespan. And that is what is called the prarabdha that we have. And then in our day-to-day life, we do good deeds and do bad deeds also, and these bring about a certain amount of other karmas which are called the agami karma. And these agami karmas can fructify in this life, or it can go back to our cloud data. Now, if you look into this whole problem, you will see that our cloud data is so big that it is almost impossible to solve all our karmic debts. Now, what does Vedanta do? Vedanta says once a person has a clear understanding of this central fact, Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. Now, if this is, Nischaya Jnanam, that means this is a doubt-free knowledge. This doubt-free knowledge, just like radiation therapy can treat cancer, this doubt-free knowledge has got a very powerful beam to burn that cloud data or the sanchita karma. That means all your cloud data is suddenly eradicated. The moment a person has a clear understanding of Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya, that person is enlightened and has awoken to a fuller level of consciousness, then the person now is so conscious, or at least he knows karma in its truest extent. And this is what is given in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita called inaction in action. Although you are doing any activity, there is no ego, there is no self, there is no somebody who's trying to prove something. And when things happen through you, then there is no further generation of karma. But then when we are born, we have come with a certain amount of punya or papa, which is our prarabdha. And this prarabdha is not dealt with through jnanam or through any other technique. And that's why even a jnani goes through physical suffering, goes through psychological suffering. And this is a beautiful explanation, not just an explanation. Vedantic teachers tell you this is the reality. And you know, when we go to a Vedantic teacher, there is a prior certain qualification called Shraddha. And when you have that Shraddha, then these things become doubt-free knowledge.
Now there's a question by Mr. Suman Kumar. Sir, what while still in the nightmare phase, for me it seems real. How can I get out of it?
Yeah, now supposing you are in a dormitory when there are a lot of people sleeping, and then you suddenly realize somebody is going through a nightmare. Now, at that moment, what is the best solution for a person who's going through that nightmare is to wake up that person. The moment the person is woken up, suddenly the nightmare disappears. Now, there is a big difference between waking up from a dream and waking up into this world when a person becomes enlightened into this world. When you wake up from the dream body disappears, the dream world disappears, and all the problems associated with the dream body and the dream world has suddenly vanished into thin air. But when a person awakens into full consciousness, the body is still the same, the world is still the same. But then, as I said, now you have become so big, and when you become so big, the prarabdha that you have to go through becomes relatively small. It becomes relatively insignificant. So that is why all the Vedantic teachers says, wake up, which means, according to them, we are still asleep. And therefore, they have their own techniques of waking up. There is one Upanishad called the Mandukya. The Mandukya Upanishad is one of the most powerful techniques to wake up. And the word Mandukya comes from frog. Sometimes the croaking of the frogs in a rainy season, when you would like to sleep, you are disturbed by the croaking noises of the frog. The Vedantic teacher's voice sometimes becomes like a croaking frog trying to say, wake up, wake up. I see another question.
It's from Ravi Shankar. How to have Vedanta philosophy in medical practice, Dr. Ravi Shankar?
How do we get medical knowledge? By going to a medical college. How do we get postgraduate knowledge? By going to a postgraduate teacher. And if you want some fellowship and higher techniques, you go to a place where there is an expertise. So too in a Vedantic knowledge. For a Vedantic knowledge, just like we have gone to medical school, we have gone through post-graduation, we have to go through a teacher who's got this knowledge. And when you go through this teacher, the teacher will not give this knowledge immediately. The teacher will test to see whether you have a certain yogyata, whether you have that eligibility. See, only when that eligibility is there, the knowledge is given. The teacher is happy to give the knowledge, but if that eligibility is not there, the knowledge is not received appropriately. Now, once there is the eligibility, the teacher will put you through certain processes if that is not there. And these processes take a certain amount of time. Just like a medical degree or postgraduate degree does not happen. It takes years of training before a person becomes medically or surgically qualified. So too, Vedantic process is like that. It takes years. It takes years until finally, when there is this dawning of knowledge. There is one beautiful experience in the Buddhist sutra called the Hridayam Sutra. The Hridayam Sutra is also called the Heart Sutra. The Heart Sutra is a dialogue between Buddha and Sariputra, and many ways comparable to Krishna and Arjuna of the Bhagavad Gita. Unlike the Bhagavad Gita, where Arjuna keeps on asking questions, Sariputra is only a quest, and the Lord Gautama Buddha is able to make out his questions, and he keeps answering his questions. And towards the end of the discussion, the teacher now knows that the student has graduated. And at the graduation ceremony, the teacher gives a Maha Mantra. And the mantra goes like this. All Buddhist sutras are in Pali. This is one exception. The Hridayam Sutra is in Sanskrit. And Buddha says, now take this mantra, Sariputra. He says, Tad yatha, it goes like this. Gate, para sam gate, bodhi swaha. And this is a famous mantra, not so much in India, but in many Southeast Asian countries, where whenever you see these Buddhists, they will be going around chanting this mantra to themselves. Gate, para sam gate, bodhi swaha. Now, this is the declaration of a graduation, Dr. Ravi Shankar. What does gate means? See, gate means gone, gone beyond. Paragate means gone beyond. Parasamgate, you've gone through graduation, you've gone through post-graduation, you've gone through a certain fellowship. You are totally eligible. And this is the ecstasy. Bodhi Swaha, what an ecstasy. One of the greatest ecstasy for a teacher is to see the student realize, and that is the exclamation of a guru when he sees the student exclaim. No more questions?
Yes. How do I empathize with my student who repeatedly has an eating disorder? Renan D'Souza.
Now, is it a medical condition or is it a psychological condition? See, you know, when a person comes to you with a medical problem, when a person comes to you with a medical problem, he or she is looking for a medical answer. At that time, they are not prepared for anything beyond. And therefore, as doctors, we need to empathize to the extent that we can and use all the therapeutic modalities that we have, physical, psychological, psychosocial, to be able to help the person with the eating disorder. Now, when a person is receptive to something of the beyond, then you can share with them what your teachers have told you.
There's one follow-up question by Suman Kumar. He says, I still don't know how to wake up. I'm the mom to a young man who has autism and began having seizures about a few years ago. This is my nightmare.
I agree. See, there is the waking up process is not a simple process. Let me share that absolutely. You know what we are not talking. That is why I have put this as the ultimate solution. Now, although I have put it as the ultimate solution, it does not mean that it is an impossible solution. Now, just because it is difficult, tell yourself it is possible. You know, Gautama Buddha had said, even if one person can achieve, it is everybody's potential to achieve. So let that be the quest. And this quest to achieve in Sanskrit is called Tivra Mumukshutva. If this is your quest, you know, remember also, as doctors, we are very concerned about doing what we can do for our patients. Let me share something, that this process of Vedantic study is seemingly selfish, because what you are doing is you are healing yourself. And once you are okay, and once you have been able to attain, you know, for you, the whole world becomes okay. If I'm okay, my world is okay. Now, then you become, when you are able to imbibe these Vedantic teachings, then what happens? You still address these problems, but then suddenly they do not become a serious problem. There is a shift from being serious to sincere. And this is what a Vedantic understanding will help us in the approach to help other people. A shift from being, instead of being serious, whenever you become serious, you take on the problem to yourself. But when you are sincere, you don't allow that problem to affect you. And this is the whole quest. As a doctor, we need to empathize. We need to feel the pain that somebody is going through, but we should not let it affect you. And therefore, it may be a jargon or a play of words, but the shift from being serious to being sincere is what I would suggest. No more questions?
There's one more question by Nimish Kumar. Nimish Sharma. He says, Hari Om sir, how do we know if we are progressing rightly on the path of waking up? Since you said it does not happen overnight, so how we know we are on the right path?
You will know. You will know, because, you know, who else can tell you if your stomach is full? You will know. You know, see, this is very personal. This is what the teachers say, you will know. And once you know, it does not matter. What is important is you should know. If you know, that is enough. Let me share a certain story, because I'm not sure how the story will answer this question. But this is a story of a man who was convinced he became a worm. And because he thought he was a worm, he could not expose himself outside because he was afraid of every bird that he would see. He thought the bird will come and peck him and kill him. So he required a lot of psychological therapy to be able to cure his concept that he's a worm. And he had a very good psychiatrist who took a long time, who gave him a lot of therapy. And then finally he became convinced that, now I know I'm not a worm. I know I'm not a worm. And the moment he left the psychiatrist building, he suddenly saw a bird. And then a doubt comes to his mind. Now, I know I'm not a worm, but does that bird know that I'm not a worm? Then he comes running back to the psychiatrist and says, doctor, why don't you address that bird? See, this is a question of one's knowing. Once you know who you are, you don't need anybody else's endorsement. And this is a very personal understanding. It's like, you will know.
Yeah, there is one more question. If we keep hitting obstacles all time, how long can we continue just by saying it's my karma?
That's true. Now, see, one of the important things to understand is the karma theory should never make us feel fatalistic. Now, while there is an aspect of karma in our life, the glory and the joy of being a human being is that we also have a free will which can mitigate, which can reduce, which can even overcome karma. Now, whenever we face a problem, and it is because of karma, we do not know if that karma is what is called a prabala karma or a durbala karma, whether it is something very strong or not so strong. Now, if the karma is not so strong, then I will be able to overcome it through physical, psychological, medical, economic, or whatever means. But if the karma is very strong against me, then all my maneuvers fail. And that is where, again, the Alcoholic Anonymous saying, now give me the courage to change the things I can, accept that which I cannot, and the wisdom to know the difference. The glory is we also have free will. And when you have free will, we will be able to determine the course of our karma, and we don't have to feel fatalistic in all situations.
There's one more question by Lenan D'Souza. It's as an absolute beginner in Vedanta, what is the minimum practice I can undertake to start empathizing with my fellow beings?
First practice is what is called karma yoga. Karma yoga means all of us work, but how do we work? Two things. One work is called Ishvara Arpana Bhava. Every client that comes to me. Now, as a doctor, anybody who comes to you has to be treated as if God has come in your place. Now, Kabir was a tailor, and when anybody would come to him, he would say, oh, my Ram has come, let me treat him. So if I'm able to handle everybody who comes to me as if God has come to me, my client, that is what is called Ishvara Arpana Bhava. Then there is something called Prasada Bhava. Some people will appreciate your work, some people may criticize your work. Now, Karma Yoga is the ability to be able to take whatever you get as a remuneration for your work as Prasada. Prasada means when you go to a place of worship, you get something to eat, you receive it very reverentially. If you're able to do these two things, that means treat each client has come as if God has come to your presence, and to be able to accept whatever the person gives you in return as a prasada, this is the first step. And this first step will bring you to teachers who will bring this understanding that, the glory of human being is to discover the divinity in you. The kingdom of God, as Jesus said, is within you. And we are here to discover, as Jesus has said, I am the truth, I am the way.
Dr. Hegdeji, there is one student here who would like to ask one question. Please, Pinky Buputa.
First of all, thank you, sir, for throwing such lights on Vedanta. It was nice to hear you. My question is, someone asked in between that when my journey will get over, and my question is how to realize that where I have reached. Like if I'm doing MBBS, then after completing 2 years, I have a clear idea that I have to go for another 3 years. Now in this journey, how to realize where do I stand?
All right, I will give you one inventory what my teacher has given me, and this is called the FIR rule. Now, in our day-to-day experiences, we get a lot of upsets. Now, what is this FIR? F stands for frequency. How frequently I lose my equilibrium. Now, as you evolve spiritually, you will see the frequency of your upset becomes less and less. I stands for intensity. Now, when you are in the early stage of intensity, it is mental. You may be watching me very closely, but you don't see any upset in me because it is only mental, and that is the first level of intensity. When my upset becomes more severe, you can make out in my voice. My voice will become louder, the pitch will change, and if you're listening to my voice, you can clearly say, why are you so upset? So you can make out in my voice. Intensity level 2 is when it is verbal. And level 3 upset is when you see it in your body, you get agitated, you're ready to hurt yourself or you hurt others. Now, what do you think R is? R means recovery. As you evolve spiritually, you will see that the recovery is much faster. Initially used to be upset for a long time. Now the duration of upset is shorter, and then you will realize very early, I'm getting upset, and even before I actually act on my upset, I'm able to control myself. And use this as an inventory for spiritual growth. My frequency, the intensity, and how quickly I recover from the upsetting situations in my life.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think there's one more question by Dr. Ramnan. I think it's a statement that he's saying teachings of Veda and Vedanta are different.
That's true. The teachings of the Vedanta means the end portion of the Veda. So basically the Vedas can be divided into Veda Purva, the first part of the Vedas, and the Veda Anta, the last part of the Vedas. Now, the Veda Purva teaches totally different from the Veda Anta. The Veda Purva teaches you a lot of techniques. It teaches you a lot of karmas, a lot of activity to be a success in the world, how to make money, how to be successful in whatever ventures you are. So that is why all the people, when you go to temples, you employ a priest to get you all the successes in the world. And so the Veda Purva is how to be a success in the world. The Veda Anta is totally different. Initially the quest is where God is the means and world is the goal. And in Vedanta, it becomes the reverse. The world is the means and God is the goal. In Veda Purva, you go to God because I want to be rich, I want to be famous, I want my disease to be cured, I want my child to be admitted to a good institution. So what happens? God becomes the service provider, and all the good things in the world become the goal. The Veda Anta is totally the reverse. Every difficulty, that is why I've chosen this topic as Vedanta, as the answer for suffering. Every suffering that you go through now becomes a means to be able to discover the godliness that is there within you. Ramanan, that is what I think so. Are we done? It's about 60 minutes.
Yes. Thank you very much, sir. It was really
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ubaji. Thanks to Swamiji for this great opportunity.
It was a very good webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.